Ladies and gentlemen, good morning to you all, distinguished judges, coaches, debaters, alumni, and our viewing audience for what promises to be a riveting clash of ideas this morning. This is the final match of the quarterfinals of the JCSA High School Debates Competition 2025. Now, the margins are very narrow, the stakes are high, and only those with clarity, courage, and craft remain. And today we'll witness what isn't necessarily just a debate, but a contest of visions and the future of work and the role of collective powers. My apologies also to note that this is round three, not of the quarterfinals, but round three of the last match of round three, moving into the quarterfinals. My name is the Cardigan Nelson, and I have the privilege this morning of serving as your chair for this round. And joining me on this esteemed panel of adjudication, I have two sharp and discerning minds, Ms. Calicia T. Vassell and Mr. Jermaine Barrett, both of which I will allow briefly to just unmute and introduce themselves and give a warm, brief welcome. Starting with Calicia.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. I'm really honored to be serving as a wing adjudicator for what I'm sure will be a very, very, very exciting match. I'm looking forward to the clash of ideas and bold, exciting argumentation. All the best to both teams.
Thank you very much, Dr. Diego. Hello, everyone. I'm Jermaine Barrett. I'll be serving as a wing adjudicator in this match, and I have become accustomed to some excellent debates in this competition so far. I expect nothing less in this one. So all the best, and may the best team win.
I also share these sentiments. May the best team win in this match, and I'm sure we will have some very interesting discourse. Now, the motion for this morning reads, this House believes that trade unions should prioritize future-oriented benefits, such as pensions and training, rather than the immediate wage increases of their workers. So at its core, it's going to be asking fundamental questions like, when representing workers, should trade unions fight for security tomorrow or survival today? And like, is long-term stability the truest form of empowerment, or does justice demand immediate material relief? Now, competing in this motion, we have two titan schools, Wolmer's Boys School in proposition and Mannings School in opposition. I'll invite Wolmer's Boys firstly to introduce themselves in proposition in the order in which they'll speak, after which Mannings School will introduce themselves also in the order in which they'll speak. Wolmer's Boys.
Good morning, all. My name is Josh Nell Powell. I am the first proposition speaker and Prime Minister for this debate.
Good morning, all. I am Jordan Dixon. I am the second proposition speaker and the Deputy Prime Minister for this debate.
Good morning, all. My name is Alden Williams, and I'm the reply speaker for the proposition.
All right, Manning School.
Good morning. My name is Elmer Noble, the first speaker for opposition and the opposition leader.
Good morning. My name is Gavonia James. I am the deputy opposition leader and
Good morning. My name is Brandon Reed, and I'll be the third speaker for the opposition.
All right. Thank you so very much to all teams and members of the respective teams for having introduced themselves. Those were Wolmer's Boys in proposition and Manning School in opposition. Now, as with any debate, there are rules which the debaters have already been briefed, but for the sake of you or viewing audience, we'll just go over the rules of this competition. Firstly, this competition will be guided by the Jade Parliamentary Debate format, which will see two teams, one in proposition, one in opposition, each comprising of three speakers, the first, second, and third, or reply speaker. Speakers have 7, 6, and 5 minutes respectively to deliver. So that's the first speakers on each team having 7 minutes, the second speakers having 6 minutes, and the third speakers having 5 minutes. Now, interestingly, at the end of the first speakers on both sides, and the second speakers also on both sides, will have 2 periods of cross-examinations respectively, each lasting 3 minutes. Now, during the 3 minutes, proposition team or the opposition team firstly will ask 3 questions of their opposition, and then the proposition team will also appeal 3 questions to their opposition teams. Questions lasting 15 seconds and the response of which will last 45 seconds. This will alternate. So in the first instance, prop will ask 3 questions to their op, followed vice versa. And in the second instance of cross-examination, the op team will first field 3 questions to their proposition team and then vice versa. After which we'll have a 1 minute grace period where the speakers have sufficient time to culminate their notes, gather their thoughts, and then we'll have the third speakers fielding their substantives for 5 minutes. Right now, all rules have been established. Speakers already aware of the respective rules and guidelines, and so I'll ask the first speaker on prop to begin her substantive or his substantive rather. So sorry, whenever he's ready. Here.
Okay, just confirming that I am still in fact audible.
Right, you have 7 minutes.
Okay, just checking again that I'm audible. You're hearing me?
Yeah, you're audible. You're clear to go.
Okay, just give me a moment to set up my timer. So I'll begin my speech on my next word. Regards, Mr. Speaker, I'm first prop for the motion that reads, this House believes that trade unions should prioritize future-oriented benefits, for example, pensions and training, rather than immediate wage increases for their workers. Let me go into some definitions. Trade unions we're going to hold to be organized bodies established to protect the common interests of employees through bargaining. Future-oriented benefits, on the other hand, are idealized goals for the working class throughout and at the end of their tenure. Let's go into a bit of characterization. Mr. Speaker, for too long, veterans and long-serving retirees find themselves entrenched within the jaws of crippling post-employment poverty. They face the inflated costs for geriatric healthcare, and they struggle to keep up with insurance payments, and their pension amount additionally is depleted far too quickly. Chair, even in Jamaica, these unfathomably deplorable conditions are a reality for many, and trade unions have the capacity and the responsibility to address this. The focal question in this debate then becomes, which model best ensures the comfort of employed citizens both during and after their tenure? Is it temporary wage increases that be value over time anyways, or systematic benefits that are sustained regardless of economic factors? We'll show you that it is the latter. As a burden, opposition may prove, or must prove rather, that workers benefit to a higher degree on their side, both in the short and long term, and show that the importance of wage increases now exceeds that of future-oriented benefits. And prop, conversely, must show that long-term priority bears greater fruit than the short term, and that trade unions have the responsibility to prioritize long-term interests over short-term demands. What does our priority look like, Mr. Speaker? It looks like an 80-20 rather approach, with the emphasis being on benefits while still allowing for incremental wage increases. This sees us increasing benefits and making them more accessible to people, and we still have wage advocacy on our side. However, it is really sporadic and occasional, because the type of capital that is required for wage increases looks like sick-outs and strikes versus long-term frameworks being required to increase benefits. And we believe that we prioritize long-term. So my first claim now becomes that long-term benefits are better for workers than wage increases, and this is built on the principle of utilitarianism. Wage increases as a warrant will depreciate over time, erasing its tangible effect on workers' living standards. Mr. Speaker, if wage increases continue, that will trigger something known as demand pull inflation, and thus requiring the need for more wages. This is a band-aid instead of a surgery, Mr. Speaker. When trade unions automatically advocate solely for wages, what happens is a continuous cycle is created, and workers do not end up materially better off. This is known as the wage price spiral, sort of a mechanism for the demand pull inflation. What happens is prices rather would rise, wage demands of workers rise, and when these trade unions oblige, the prices are going to rise again. And so we see an endless cycle with persons earning more nominal figures, but ultimately they're materially worse off than originally. Benefits on our side of the world actually cut costs and leaves more disposable income for a longer period of time by offsetting these fixed costs. Inflation index pensions is one way of doing this, and it preserves purchasing power. Healthcare benefits will continue to reduce fixed costs and leave persons with more money in their pockets at the end of the month, and workers will retain this disposable income for a longer period of time. Our house is more profitable to workers in the long run. My second warrant is that in high-risk industries such as policing, medicine, and national defense or the military, employment benefits are no longer considered as a luxury, but they really are necessities. The context here is that there are certain professions that naturally expose workers to non-optional and job-linked risks. These risks cannot be mitigated through wages alone. Once it is that harm occurs in these instances, money is completely irrelevant if protection is absent. High-risk sectors include things like policing, healthcare, and military and disaster response, and they face things such as violent injury, PTSD, permanent disability, infectious disease, burnout, long-term physical strain, injury, and even death. Mr. Speaker, why do wages fail in all of these sectors? Because a wage increase assumes that the person has a continued ability to work, and this is not the case. An injury and illness removes earning capacity completely. And no amount of prior wages can retroactively buy protection. Why do benefits work better? Because comprehensive health care can create the elimination of out-of-pocket medical costs. Disability coverage preserves income stream after injury. Mental health support reduces long-term unemployment risks. And the empirical evidence for this is the Caribbean Development Bank in 2020 would have told us that workers in hazardous public sector roles without comprehensive benefits face catastrophic financial loss following injury, and these families often fall below poverty lines within 3 to 5 years. And this fact is still true today. My last warrant on this thing is that CROP's approach to priority sustains wealth and acquisitions in the long term, but also allows for additional benefit in the short term. And this is why we're going 80-20 instead of 100 to 0. Workers still face immediate expenses. We understand this. Emergency cost of living pressures exist, and unions still retain the flexibility for targeted wage relief. But what we are saying is that the key distinction here is that wages should be used as a tactical tool and benefits as the strategic foundation. Prioritization matters here because union bargaining power is finite. Every dollar negotiated toward wages is a dollar not invested. And given that we're not eliminating the function of arguing for wage increases by trade unions, workers are still able to benefit from the occasional pay boost, but this is not a reliable structure. And by prioritizing benefits, strategic wage increases can be allowed where necessary, but it is not the basis of the entire thing. And my impacts here is that we achieve a utilitarian payoff. We have long-term retirement security, intergenerational stability, and reduced post-retirement poverty. And the net outcome here is a higher total welfare across the worker's entire life. My second claim is that prioritizing future-oriented benefits shifts trade unions from reactive in distributing bargaining towards sustainable institutional leadership. My first point is that unions gain credibility as nation-building institutions when they negotiate structural benefits rather than episodic wage adjustments. In Jamaica, the Bustamante Industrial Trade Union and the National Workers Union were not merely wage negotiation bodies, they were central actors in shaping labor legislation and industrial policy. Their influence extended into social development, minimum wage regulation, and labor standards. And when it is that these unions bargain for pensions, structured training, and institutional safeguards, they revive that developmental identity, and they become stakeholders in national productivity and fiscal stability, which we believe is a better outcome than the opposition side of the world. My second one is that emphasizing structural reforms reduces the politicization of wage cycles. In Jamaica, public sector wage negotiations frequently intensify around electoral periods, and this creates incentives for governments to offer immediate salary increases to secure electoral favor, such as fiscal policy. Things such as fiscal populism can undermine budgetary discipline and generate inflationary pressures. By prioritizing pension reform, skill certification, and long-term benefits, we remove negotiation from short-term electoral calculations. And I'll go into my impacts now. And the impacts here are enhanced democratic stability through the reduction of wage or vote-driven wage inflation. We also achieve improved fiscal stability on our side of the house. And as a result of that, governments commit to actuarially sound and long-term frameworks rather than ad hoc increases. And lastly, elevation of unions moves up into a credible policy partner in national development. And this increases their legitimacy domestically and internally. I would believe that ultimately these are better outcomes than on the opposition side of the world, and we
We thank the first speaker for that verified and substantive opening to this debate, and now welcome the first speaker on opposition to counteract with her substantives, furthering this debate on opposition. Hear, hear.
Good morning again. Am I audible?
Yep, you're audible. Go ahead.
First and foremost, my apologies. Mr. Speaker, preposition mentions inflation and that it will increase over time. First and foremost, however, give me a moment. All right, first and foremost, workers do not cause inflation, so keeping wages at this minimum is only punishing them. What causes inflation is the increase in oil prices and the import of goods. On top of that, this is exactly why inflation should. On top of that, inflation is exactly why wages must increase. Prices rising equals workers losing purchasing power. The inevitable is prices will rise, so if wages stay the same, that is a pay cut. Additionally, you say that inflation will increase, but what about the value of future pensions? John Maynard Keynes once said, "In the long run, we are all dead. Sacrificing the present for an uncertain future is like a blind man hoping to see the light, hopeful yet uncertain." Mr. Speaker, my esteemed teammates and my fellow opponents, a pleasant morning. We, the opposition, stand firmly against the motion. This House believes that trade unions should prioritize future-oriented benefits, example, pensions and trainings, rather than immediate wage increases for their workers. Before I delve into why this proposal is societal suicide, proposition has defined some key terms that we, the opposition, acknowledge. However, allow me to shed light on the context of this debate. To prioritize means to place a great denied. To prioritize means to place a greater significance on one thing over another. In this case, proposition is placing possible future over today's needed survival. We're not against future-oriented benefits or banning them. On our side of the house, we're simply saying wages should come first. Wages are money paid regularly to workers for their labor, which they rely on to meet their immediate needs, such as food, housing, transportation, and daily living expenses. Currently, trade unions in Jamaica prioritize securing immediate wage increases whilst negotiating future-oriented benefits such as pensions and training.
Point of information.
Accepted.
You tell us that inflation will not increase over time because workers don't cause inflation, but I think you fundamentally misunderstood our mechanism. The mechanism here is that workers are going to increase inflation because if it is that they're demanding more money, that gives them more money to spend, and then prices will automatically rise based on this economic principle. How do you contend with this?
Well, how I contend with this is that if inflation will increase, so will the future-oriented benefits that you guys are proposing. Additionally, this ensures that workers can meet their present financial needs while also maintaining long-term security, effectively protecting workers today without compromising their future. Mr. Speaker, my substantives are to highlight that immediate wage increases rather than future-oriented benefits by elaborating on the cost of living pressures Jamaican workers face, the uncertainty of success for future-oriented benefits, and that migration is a current problem in Jamaica and will continue to increase if wages aren't prioritized. My deputy opposition leader will refute proposition arguments and further elaborate on my substantives and reinforce the cost of living crisis and show why prioritizing future benefits over immediate wages weakens workers' unions and the economy. While my member of opposition will refute the government's case, reinforce our arguments, and show clearly why we, the opposition, has won this debate. Mr. Speaker, trade unions must prioritize immediate wage increases because Jamaican workers face severe cost of living pressures daily, and delaying wage improvements in favor of future-oriented benefits causes direct economic harm while undermining the core purpose of unions. As of June 2025, Jamaica's national minimum wage is only 16,000 per week, or approximately 64,000 per month, which is barely sufficient to cover basic living expenses, especially as inflation reached around 4.5% in 2025, according to the Government of Jamaica, Ministry of Labor and Social Security 2025, driven largely by rising food, housing, and utility costs. This means workers are already struggling to meet their basic needs, and prioritizing future-oriented benefits over wages forces them to sacrifice present survival for uncertain promises, since pensions and trainings cannot pay for food, rent, or transportation today. Therefore, prioritizing future-oriented benefits over immediate wages not only harms workers' ability to survive today, but also dismantles the very institution designed to protect their economic interests. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, future-oriented benefits are inherently uncertain, while wage increases provide immediate and economic relief for our workers. Long-term benefits not accepted. Long-term benefits such as pensions, retirement plans, and employer-funded training depend on factors outside workers' control, including employer stability, economic condition, and whether workers remain in the same job long enough to qualify. This is particularly problematic in Jamaica, where labor mobility is common and many workers shift between sectors or employment arrangements within the labor force of over 1.49 million people. In an economy that remains vulnerable to global economic shocks, inflation, natural disasters, and business closure, there is no guarantee that promised pensions or future benefits will materialize or retain their value. Therefore, prioritizing uncertain future benefits forces workers to sacrifice economic security today for promises that may never be fulfilled, exposing them to greater long-term financial vulnerability and instability. Furthermore, low wages in Jamaica are an evident driver of our worker migration, and prioritizing future-oriented benefits instead of immediate wage increases only worsens our problem. Jamaica has some of the lowest salary in the Caribbean, and this is very evident. And according to the Caribbean Salary Survey Report, PayPulse 2024, it found that poor wage competitiveness has pushed skilled professionals, including nurses, teachers, and public sector workers, people who we need to migrate to countries, the United States, Canada, in search of better pay. Mr. Speaker, research from the Pan American Health Organization, PAHO, and the World Bank also confirms that Caribbean workers migrate primarily due to insufficient wages and better financial opportunities abroad, not because of a lack of training or long-term benefits. This can be seen now in today's society by weakened healthcare, reduced educational quality, and slowing economic growth. This proposal from team government seems nice, but ultimately creates skilled workers for other countries. Future-oriented benefits cannot retain workers who cannot afford to meet their basic needs today. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, Jamaican workers are already struggling to survive, and prioritizing uncertain future benefits over immediate wage increases only deepens their hardship and weakens the purpose of trade unions.
That's overall time. Thank you,
The
Speaker.
oppositioners.
Thank you so very much to the opposition for that very fine speech. I just encourage speakers to just keep a lookout in the chat for the time signals, or if you're able to time yourself so as not to lapse the time that you've been given in addition to the 15-second grace period that you have. That being said, though, ladies and gentlemen, we have concluded the first two speakers on pop and opposition in this debate, and now we're in the exciting cross-examination period. We'll first have the proposition team fielding 3 questions to our opposition. Questions should be 15 seconds and the response 45 seconds. So Mannings, Wolmers, you have 15 seconds. You can ask your questions whenever you're ready. Mind you, the cross-examination in this instance lasts 3 minutes.
Okay, am I audible?
Yeah, just start. You said this one.
We believe that low wages in status quo are caused by low productivity, and training our workers effectively can improve productivity and increase GDP. Do you think it's better to just give these workers more money or give them the opportunity to make more money with training and qualification?
We are not against training. We are against the fact that long-term benefits outweigh immediate needs. What we are saying is not, oh, don't give them training, oh, don't give them a pension, but at the same time, increase their spending power, increase the money that they have, that they can invest in their future, that they can even invest in themselves, and that they can have an enjoyable and livable life.
Okay, you claim that Jamaican workers have severe needs for money right now, but 2 things. One, we actually give them more disposable income with our framework for focused on benefits. And in addition to this, wage interest still exists in our world with the 80-20 model. How do you contend with this?
Could you please repeat?
You claim that Jamaican workers have severe needs for money right now due to the cost of living crisis or whatnot. But 2 things, we give them more disposable income on our side of the house with our structure that cuts fixed costs. And additionally, wage interest and wage advocacy still exists on our side of the
I'm
world.
so sorry
How do you
to cut
contend?
you, but could you frame that in the in a question? Not the preamble isn't necessary, just a question.
Okay. How does your idea of Jamaican workers having severe needs for money directly contend with the fact that we both have give them a more disposable income on our side and that wage interest still exists on our side of the house?
How are you giving them disposable income without a wage increase? You're giving them long-term benefits, not a wage increase.
Interesting. According to Statin, the inflation rate in Jamaica currently sits at 8% annually, whilst nominal wage growth fluctuates around the 5% mark. Why then should we prioritize investing in an approach that has already been proven to be futile in increasing worker welfare?
Please repeat.
According to Statin, the inflation rate in Jamaica currently sits at 8% annually, whilst nominal wage growth fluctuates between the 5% mark. Why should we continue to prioritize investing in an approach that already proves futile to increasing worker welfare?
Okay, so we're not prioritizing directly an only wage increase. We're trying to balance all of these things. So while the inflation might differ from the nominal wage increase, it is important to note that prioritizing long-term wage benefits would not be enough for the people to survive now, as they need food to sustain themselves.
So we aren't saying that future-oriented benefits aren't bad, but we're saying that wage increase should come first because people's survival for today's society comes first rather than the future.
All right, we thank Wilma's for those very spirited questions and Mannings for this very good response to these questions. So now we'll flip over the cross-question arrangement and have Manning School field 3 questions to Wilma's boys, and Wilma's boys will respond subsequently to these 3 questions. Whenever you're ready, Mannings.
Okay. If you believe human bargaining power is futile, why should unions exist at all? What role are they supposed to play?
Well, first and foremost, let's take into consideration that you've completely skewed what the whole purpose of a union is. The union exists to protect worker welfare. And this is not something that is just limited to the short term. Fundamentally, you've misunderstood this.
And the entire principle, the foundation of why trade unions were created is because governments realize that individuals do not do enough to actually secure their long-term interests and lifetime future welfare. The whole point of unions being and collective bargaining being a thing is because individual negotiations are not as effective as collective negotiations with unions. That's their whole purpose.
This is because of the principle of egoism, because persons are innately selfish, and as a result, they're not going to aid in the development of the whole.
Okay. Why are Jamaican nurses, teachers, and professionals migrating if training and future benefits already exist?
We didn't say that these things already exist. In fact, probably the whole reason that we're prioritizing it is because there's a need for it. We've understood that there are benefits that persons are finding abroad beyond just wages, because we have a nominal wage increase every single year. As we've said, it's 5%. And this is already chasing inflation. So we cannot continue to over-invest in a system that's not already working. If the persons are attracted to benefits by virtue of them leaving, according to you, then we should give them benefits here, give them pull factors so they can stay local.
And to add on to that, And to add on to that, we have to look at the fact of this, right? With unions and this, and with unions.
Nice one. Leave it.
Okay. So can the government guarantee that pension values will maintain their real value after decades of inflation and economic changes if they?
Well, you have to look at the fact you're ignoring the point that our first speaker made. Our first speaker specifically said that our pensions are inflation indexed. What does that mean? That the contributions that are in the pensions, they're matching or going with the rate of inflation. So our pensions actually maintain their purchasing power, or their real purchasing power, the real benefit that they give to workers in the long run. They're not going to be stifled by inflation. They're actually going to be working with it and pushing against it to ensure that workers still have that real purchasing power in the future, in the long term, when they retire.
And to answer your original question, this is actually how we give them more disposable income without increasing their wages, because of the fact that we're not only cutting their costs, but in addition to this, we're giving them money that isn't affected by inflation. And as a result of this, it's better.
And with that, ladies and gentlemen, our first period of cross-examination has elapsed. Both teams asked some very interesting questions, and likewise, we got some very spirited and substantive responses. All right. So with that, we're now moving into the next phase of this debate, which is where the second speaker on behalf of Wolmer's Boys will present his substantive case, furthering the case of the proposition team in this debate. This speaker has 6 minutes within which to deliver his substantive. Just a reminder to all speakers to keep an eye out in the chat for the time signals, or you can keep your own time. All right. So second speaker, whenever you're ready. You're here.
Okay, I will begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. I'm second speaker for House proposition, and I stand firmly in support of the motion that this House believes that trade unions should prioritize future-oriented benefits rather than immediate wage increases for workers. I'll move straight into rebuttals. From my first rebuttal, function. Up misunderstands the function of trade unions. Unions aren't simply preference aggregators that just deliver what workers want today. If that were true, unions would be redundant. Unions exist because individual workers systematically fail to secure their long-term interests. That's why leaders are elected as trustees, not messengers, to exercise judgment, correct market failures, and protect lifetime welfare. History proves this. Unions won safety rules, pensions, and labor protections despite worker resistance at the time. Following short-term preferences, collapsed retirement security, and exercising fiduciary responsibility delivered dignity. Respecting workers doesn't mean obeying every present demand. It means protecting their future. I'm moving to my second rebuttal, benefits in the short term. Opposition focuses on gross wages, but ignores fixed costs, where workers actually lose money. Small wage increases are quickly absorbed by healthcare, insurance, childcare, and transport, leaving little real disposable income. Benefits, however, directly offset these costs through risk pooling and employer contributions, increasing spendable income now. As a result, workers with comprehensive benefits often have more real disposable income during their working years rather than those with higher nominal wages but no benefits. Your strategy for wage increases has already been employed in Jamaica, yet workers are still migrating because they don't get any real purchasing power through these actual strategies. We give them more real purchasing power through disposable income, and you don't. My last rebuttal, pension structures. Opposition says that pensions are risky for workers. The opposite is true. Portable pensions are what make workers resilient to disruption. Wages vanish the moment a job is lost. Pensions don't. When held in the worker's name, pension will survive the layoff, bankruptcies, job changes, industry collapse, and even death with built-in survivors benefits. Wages do none of this. Employers can fail and pension assets are still protected. Combined with training, pensions give workers time, leverage, and mobility. Skills enable fast re-employment and wage preservation. Pensions make transition survivable. Wages alone leave workers desperate and exposed to all sorts of harms and causes that come when they're laid off by their jobs or their industries collapse. The risk hierarchy is clear. Wage-only workers face the highest risk, while pension-only workers face less, and workers with portable pensions plus training face the lowest. I'm moving to my first and only substantive of this speech. Trade unions have a legal responsibility to ensure fairness between generations of workers across their entire life cycles. My first warrant, path dependency creates structural responsibility. Bargaining decisions create path dependency. Early allocations of bargaining capital determine institutional strength for decades. Comprehensive benefit systems depend on long-term institutional development. They require structured pension contributions, negotiated healthcare networks, established training and certification partnerships, pool insurance systems, and the like. If unions prioritize wages instead, this infrastructure remains weak and later reform becomes political and financially costly. The 1980s choice to focus on wages made reform increasingly difficult for every decade to date, creating a retirement crisis today. Jamaica has a 65% retirement poverty rate, and this is supplemented by the CDB's 2020 report, citing declining pension coverage, healthcare coverage, insurance provision, and skills development infrastructure in periods dominated by wage-focused negotiations like we're in now. Take the JTA as an example. Benefit-focused negotiations in the 1990s produced stronger long-term outcomes, about 60% income replacement, comprehensive healthcare, low out-of-pocket costs, access to training, housing support, and a low elder poverty rate of around 8%. Comparatively, the 2000s wage-focused approach led to a significant reduction in those same criteria. This demonstrates that union bargaining strategy creates long-term path dependency, shaping workers' overall lifetime welfare. My second warrant, time inconsistent preferences require life cycle protection. The International Labour Organization reports that roughly 80% of workers later regret not adequately saving for retirement. Why? Because of a lack of insurance when medical emergencies arise, not having skills when industries change, and not having housing equity when facing retirement. This demonstrates that workers' present self undervalues future welfare in predictable, measurable ways. In their 20s and similar stages, workers want money now for immediate lifestyle experiences and various possessions. As workers age, rejected, they prioritize financial security, health protection, and stable housing. They regret not saving more, maintaining insurance, developing their skills, and building equity for housing. The Oilfield Workers Trade Union in Trinidad demonstrates this distinction perfectly. They prioritized benefits during the 1970s to 90s, leading to income replacement, minimal elder poverty, health coverage, suitable skills, and home ownership at higher rates. Other trade unions who gave their workers higher wages had workers facing up to 50% poverty rates by 70, horrible medical expenses, unemployment, and home insecurity. If unions reduce themselves to transmitting present preferences, they're not serving workers, they're amplifying the cognitive biases that destroy workers' futures comprehensively. I'll take your point of information right now, Mannings. Okay, I seem that they don't have a point anymore. I'll move to my third warrant, that institutional purpose demands fiduciary judgment. Unions exist because individual workers face structural failures such as information deficits, short-term bias, and lower bargaining power compared to employers. This shows us that individuals on their own are incapable of securing their own long-term welfare. This means that unions have to take on the role of corrective institutions that solve problems, not just passive people pleasers. Leaders of unions are elected as trustees, not simply delegates. Their sole focus is to provide judgment on members' behalf because they lack the various structural advantages that trade unions have. Trade unions have the ability to build comprehensive benefit systems that correct long-term market failures, overcome present bias across multiple dimensions, and create durable infrastructure and protect workers' complete welfare, across their entire lives, maximizing their lifetime utility. I'll move into my impacts. Prevent systematic elderly poverty and bankruptcy. Our approach reverses Jamaica's high poverty rate by prioritizing comprehensive protection rather than wages alone. Evidence from teacher cohorts, as posited above, show that benefit-focused bargaining produced stable, dignified retirements, while wage-focused strategies led to higher poverty and compounded crises across multiple areas of life. My second impact protects against multiple life cycle risks simultaneously. Prioritizing comprehensive benefits creates multiple layers of protection. Pensions guard against financial risks, insurance protects against medical costs, training support job transitions, and housing programs build stability. To close off, UP fails to understand that trade unions simply are not supposed to just listen to what workers demand, but they have to take into consideration the information that they have at hand to understand that, look, what determines how we give workers the most lifetime welfare, and through our model, we give workers benefits in not only in the long term, but also in the short term, improving their welfare better than UP strategy ever has.
And with that, we thank the second proposition speaker from Wolmer's Voice for his fiery and very, very impactful substantive in his speech, furthering the case on proposition as to why we should focus on long-term benefits. With that, we welcome the second opposition speaker, from Mannings School to deliver her substantive to further the case of the opposition. Here.
I will begin now. Honorable adjudicators, my worthy opponents, my teammates, and members of the House, a pleasant afternoon. This debate is not about whether pensions or trainings have value. We, the opposition, acknowledge that they do. The real issue before this House is whether trade unions should allow workers to endure hardship today in exchange for promises tomorrow. Because when you strip away the policy language and economic theory, that is exactly what the government is agreeing with. They ask teachers, nurses, and public officers to starve today with the hope of eating tomorrow. Mr. Speaker, hope is a poor man's meal. My first speaker has already shown that Jamaica's minimum wage stands at Jamaican $16,000 per week, roughly Jamaican $64,000 per month, while inflation sits at around 3.6%, driven by rising food, housing, and utility costs. That means real purchasing power is shrinking. The question before this House today is about priority. We contend that when workers are struggling to survive in the present, it is both unjust and unrealistic to ask them to sacrifice immediate wage increases in favor of benefits they may not even live long enough to enjoy. Workers are not imagining hardship, Mr. Speaker, they are living it. I will extend our case by demonstrating the real-life financial pressure facing civil servants, prove that future-oriented benefits are structurally uncertain, and show that wages are the true foundation for long-term security. Mr. Speaker, let us ground this debate in the reality of civil servant finances. A public school teacher in Jamaica earns on average approximately Jamaican 1.1 to 3 million annually, roughly 90,000 to 240,000 per month before deductions. Naturally, depending on experience, a registered nurse in the public system may earn between 1.5 Jamaican and 2.2 million annually, placing monthly earnings roughly between 125,000 Jamaican dollars and 166,000, depending on experience and grade likewise. Even junior doctors, though earning more, still face deductions, loan repayments, and high living costs that consume much of their salary. Now compare that to living expenses in urban areas like Kingston and St. Andrew. Rent for a one-bedroom, modest or two-bedroom apartment can range between 90,000 Jamaican dollars and 150,000 per month. Mortgage payments for middle-income earners can sit at Jamaican 100,000 or more monthly. Electricity and water bills combined can range from Jamaican 50,000 to 25,000 depending on usage. Transportation costs, especially for commuters, can exceed Jamaican 30,000 to $40,000 per month. Food expenses for a small household can range from Jamaican 30,000 or surpass 80 to 100,000 per month due to inflation. This according to an article from the Observer titled Jamaica's Middle Class 2026. Add school expenses, medical costs, and loan repayments, and even so-called middle-income are denied with very little disposable income. So, Mr. Speaker, when the motion asks us to prioritize pension or training, what is it effectively saying? What it is effectively saying is continue trying with what you have now, struggle, continue budgeting every dollar, continue choosing between groceries and bills. But hey, trust us that decades from now, you might benefit substantially. Mr. Speaker, that is not economic justice. That is delayed relief. You cannot meaningfully prioritize retirement savings if you cannot comfortably pay rent today. Future-oriented benefits are subjected. What?
Point of information.
Denied. Future-oriented benefits are subjected to uncertain future-oriented benefits that are conditional. Trade unions are advocacy organizations, not executive governments. Their power lies in collective bargaining, protest, and negotiation, not in making binding economic policies. They exist to represent workers' interests, pushing for better wages, benefits, and conditions, but ultimately it is the governments and employers who decide whether policy changes will be adopted into law or practice. Governments thus are not subjected to agree, denied with or not agree with such policy. And even if they do, geopolitical uncertainties and the global markets are subjected to serious change that may affect future outcomes or plans of the government, and thereby can opt out of such plans if they see so fit. Pensions and training depend on factors outside workers' controls, including employer stability, economic conditions, and whether workers remain in the same position long enough to qualify. Jamaica is a small open economy vulnerable to shocks, natural disasters, and inflation. Policies can change. Pensions can be restructured. Training opportunities can be limited. Wage increases, however, are immediate and guaranteed. If a civil servant receives a wage increase today, that money is tangible. It reduces debt. It improves nutrition. It strengthens household. Prioritizing uncertain future benefits forces workers to sacrifice guaranteed economic security today for promises that may never be fulfilled. That is not responsibility unionism. That is risk. Wages are foundational. The motion creates a false choice between short-term wages and long-term benefits. Higher wages are what allows workers to save independently, invest wisely, support children's education, contribute consistently to pension schemes, build emergency funds. Without adequate wages, future planning becomes impossible. If teachers are financially stretched, student outcomes suffer. If nurses are overworked and underpaid, morale drops. If wages remain uncompetitive, skilled professionals migrate abroad. It is not rocket science, it is reality. Prioritizing future benefits while wages stagnate does not secure the future, it weakens it. Balance is the true solution. We are not rejecting pensions or training, we are rejecting forced prioritization. Trade unions should not treat wages and future-oriented benefits equally. Workers should not be asked to sacrifice present dignity for long-term promises. Balance is what ensures stability, equity, and fairness in the workforce. Financial instability is not just an economic issue, it has a social consequence. According to sociologists such as Mustafa, economic stress is a leading contributor to crime, violence, and school dropouts. If workers cannot meet their basic needs today, that strain affects families and communities. The government, by prioritizing future benefits over wages, risks perpetuating cycles of financial hardship and social instability. Weighing the debate on our side, the harm is immediate. Financial strain, household instability, migration of skilled workers, erosion of trust in unions. On the government side, the harm is speculative. Possible benefits decades from now. In workers' welfare, immediate and guaranteed harm outweighs uncertain long-term promises. Trade unions were built to protect workers now, not to demand patience for distant promises. Starting today with the hope of eating tomorrow is not policy, it is injustice. And hope, Mr. Speaker, is a poor man's meal. We, the opposition, stand firmly against the motion. We stand for balance, we stand for fairness and dignity of Jamaican workers. Labor market research on trade union effects around the world consistently shows that trade unions raise wages significantly. Studies have found a union wage premium of roughly 12 to 20% in many contexts where unions focus on wage negotiations. We rest.
And with that, we thank the second speaker on opposition for Manning School for that very fine and substantive rebuttal and substantive delivery. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are now in our second and final period of cross-examinations, where we'll see firstly the opposition team, that's Mannings, fielding 3 questions to the proposition team in Wolmer's. Questions, I'm being told, are now limited to 10 seconds and the response 45 seconds. So Manning School, whenever you're ready, you may field your first question to Wolmer's.
Can the government explain how a worker who is struggling to pay rent and food today is realistically expected to prioritize a pension that they may only access decades later?
Yeah, but you guys, it seems as though you guys are not listening to what we said throughout this debate. We've already said that through our measures. We said that we're going to offset healthcare. We said that we're going to offset insurance, childcare, transportation costs. All of those things are benefits that we offset in the now. Those fixed costs, when you reduce those, that gives workers actually more disposable income to spend on stuff like food, to spend on stuff like utilities, and we give them that amount of money. So we're reducing their sufferation. We're giving them real income. Whereas on your side of the house, we're going to increase wages. Your wage increases will not match inflation. As a result, persons will be nominally richer, but they will not have more real purchasing power, and they will still be confined to the same basket of goods as they had originally.
In addition to this, the government has made several reforms and amendments to how pensions actually work, and so it's not a case where they only access it at the end of their tenure. That is not what we're vying for in our world.
All right, so if future benefits are enough, why are trained Jamaican professionals migrating primarily for higher salaries rather than better pension systems?
First of all, the premise of your question is flawed because originally in this debate, you would have told us that persons are seeing benefits outside. They're seeing better healthcare things and stuff like that. You were the one who told us this. And because of this fact, you cannot like run back and say that, oh, they're running away for higher wages. And even if this were the case, higher wages simply doesn't solve the problem that workers have in Jamaica right now. The problem is they need more tangible, like disposable income, and increasing their wages that is going to increase the cost of items that they have to buy does not solve this, because they're going to cut into the surplus that you allegedly would have given them. And at the end of the day, no real meaningful improvement in welfare is going to be made.
Okay. What is the plan set out by your government to implement the comprehensive wage benefits? Future-oriented benefits. And what probability would you realistically output of it being able to work?
Save it. All right. Let's tackle probability here, because the fact of the matter is employers are actually more likely to give benefits rather than actual wage increases. Why? Because these benefits that we give them often serve them as tax deductibles that they can take off and reduce costs for themselves and the business. While your wages, they're simply just increasing costs for them, and they're likely to be more resistant to that because in the end of the day, it's cutting in their profit margins, and they have to seek other methods of gaining revenue, such as offlaying workers or maybe increasing costs leading to the wage price parity.
And in addition to all of this, you asked for my mechanism. But I've told you it's an 80-20 approach. We're going to emphasize benefits, and mind you, the capital that benefits require is more so long-term strategic planning that is going to involve the government, obviously, but they're going to lobby for it as a trade union. On your side, wage increases, it's something that they already do, and it's been failing, and you're going to continue to invest in a failing program. It's not making sense.
All right, we thank you, Opposition Mannings, for those very three fine questions. And now welcome Wolmer's Boys School to contract with their three questions to Opposition Mannings team. Wolmer's, whenever you're ready.
Rallying off of the last question you asked with Mannings, what is the mechanization of your nuance that you propose? At what point in the debate do you fully explain how you're going to prioritize wages in your world? What does that look like? We don't know.
We would have stated in my speech, Mr. Prime Minister, that we're asking for balance. We're asking for a balance as it relates to wage increases and pensions.
Okay. Do you not also concede that trade unions have an inherent duty to overall welfare of workers? What was that time for me?
Oh, I know, I don't think that's me.
Continue, you're good.
Okay. Do you not concede, Mannings, that trade unions have an inherent duty to the overall welfare of workers as opposed to just wages?
Yes, the trade union has.
Sorry, could you repeat?
Sorry, could you repeat?
Do you not concede that trade unions have an inherent duty to the overall welfare of workers as opposed to simply wages?
As a trade union do have a duty to the workers, but the trade unions are supposed to advocate for the essential needs of workers now rather than the future. Yes, the future is important, but what about today's needs? What about today's survival? If now is unstable, what about the future? How can you reach the future if the present is unstable? This is what the trade union should focus on, the immediate needs of the workers.
And my final question, how do you contend with the historical example my second speaker would have given you of the JTA utilizing our benefit-focused model in the 1990s and yielding better welfare results than the current wage-focused model of the 2000s that you posit?
In my speech, unfortunately, I did not get my time run out on me. But labor market research on trade union effects around the world consistently shows that trade unions wage raise wages significantly. Studies have found a union wage premium of roughly 12-20% in many contexts where unions focus on wage negotiations, where unions instead shift emphasis to fringe benefits and future-oriented security without equally pushing for current wage growth. Workers often see the real purchasing power that diverge negatively relative to inflation and living costs. So that model would have been combated in the United States auto industry in the mid-20th century. Response time elapsed.
Right. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we've come to an end of our second and final period of cross-examination. Now we'll go into a 1 minute grace period where both teams will have 1 minute really to tie up their notes, gather their thoughts, after which we'll have the opposition speaker from Mannings, the third opposition speaker from Mannings, deliver his substantive reply in 5 minutes, after which we'll have the proposition team, as Wolmer, their third proposition or reply speaker, to deliver his substantive rebuttals also in 5 minutes. That being said, your 1 minute starts now.
One minute has elapsed. There you go.
Thank you so much, Felicia. So that being said, guys, we now resume this sitting. And I'm now welcoming the third and final speaker from the opposition, Manning School, to deliver his substantive speech in the 5 minutes. That's Mr. Brandon Reed. Here.
Are you hearing me? All right. Yeah. Honorable adjudicators, members of this House. At the beginning of this debate, the government tried to make it seem as though the opposition is against the future. Let me make this absolutely clear. We're not against pensions, we're not against training, we're not against long-term stability. What we are against is asking workers to prioritize the future when many of them are struggling to survive the present. Because survival must come before stability, and stability must come before growth, not the other way around. Our opposition leader showed you that Jamaican workers are already facing intense cost of living pressure. Wages are struggling to keep up with inflation, food, housing, transportation, and utilities continue to rise. Our second speaker then demonstrated that when workers lose purchasing power, it doesn't just hurt households, it weakens the wider economy, increases stress on families, and affects communities across the country. So the real question in this debate is simple. Should trade unions prioritize future promises over workers' immediate needs? And when we look at the reality workers face, the answer is clearly no. Let us address the government's main idea. They say long-term benefits create stability, but that argument only works for workers who are already stable. It only works for people who can already afford rent, food, and transportation without struggling. Our side of the house is speaking for the workers who cannot. Because a pension cannot pay bills today, training cannot buy groceries this week, future benefits cannot survive a present crisis. And if workers cannot survive the present, they may never reach the future the government is promising. Now let us deal with another argument we expected from the government, the inflation argument. They may say wage increases are pointless because inflation will eat them, but that logic is completely backwards. Inflation is why wages must increase. When prices rise but wages stay the same, workers are effectively receiving a pay cut. Their purchasing power declines, their ability to support their families decline, their financial stress increases. So inflation does not weaken our argument, it strengthens it. Because rising prices make fair wages more necessary, not less. And we must also remember that inflation does not only affect wages, it affects future benefits too. Pension value can decline over time. Economic instability can disrupt long-term plans. Policy changes can alter benefits. So the government is asking workers to rely on benefits that are also vulnerable to the same economic pressures that they claim to worry about. Now let's just talk about fairness, because fairness in this debate must be redefined. Fairness is not asking workers to be patient while costs rise around them. Fairness is ensuring that employers pay workers properly for the labor they provide today. Workers should not have to struggle now while being told their reward will come decades later. Trade unions were created to protect workers when they need protection the most, and that is now. And this is where the government's model becomes dangerous. When unions prioritize future benefits over wages, they reduce the urgency to fix immediate problems. They shift attention away from the present economic pressure. And once that happens, workers lose bargaining power. So instead of strengthening workers, the motion weakens them. Now let us weigh this debate. On the government side, they offer potential long-term gains, but those gains depend on stability, time, and conditions outside workers' control. On our side, we defend something far more certain: immediate survival, stronger financial stability, and greater flexibility for workers to save, plan, and invest for their own future. Because when wages improve, workers gain the ability to build their own long-term security. So the future is not ignored. It is built on a stronger present. And that is the key difference between our side and the government. They want to start with the future. We start with survival. Because if workers cannot stand security today, they cannot build tomorrow. For those reasons, we firmly reject this motion. Opposition rests our case.
And with that, we thank Mr. Brandon Reed for his fine, substantive, and closing of this debate from the vantage point of the opposition. Thank you very much indeed, Manning School. Now, we turn this debate over to the final speaker on proposition and thereby the final speaker in this debate, Mr. Alden Williams, to represent Wolmer's voice as the third speaker from the proposition. Here.
I'll begin my speech on my next word. 4 rebuttals. 1, the opposition claims to seek balance, but that blatantly concedes the prioritization which this motion mandates. 2, the opposition says that inflation rises and that's why we need to increase wages. But it's important that we recognize that future-oriented investments, especially pension funds, grow exponentially, unlike salary. Increasing wages will increase purchasing power temporarily, but demand for inflation will consume it. 3, the opposition claims that individuals can invest money themselves, but international labor data shows that the vast majority of workers later regret inadequate retirement planning. The 25-year-old demanding high wages becomes the 60-year-old man facing medical and housing insecurity. A union that amplifies short-term bias fails its life cycle duty. 4, they claim that the minimum wage is low, and we agree. That's why we still have 20% allocation towards wage increases. But the real reason why wages are low is because the working class is underskilled, undertrained, and undereducated. More skill and productivity will increase our GDP and therefore boost wages. Simply increasing wages now will only exacerbate inflation and unemployment. We need a strategic, future-oriented policy to actually fix this issue. Chair, this debate turns on 2 fundamental countries. 1, liquidity versus lifetime welfare, and 2, paternalism versus autonomy, both of which the proposition clearly wins. Clash 1, immediate liquidity versus lifetime welfare. The opposition claims that wages are survivable, but our case never denies short-term needs. Under our 80-20 prioritization model, unions retain the capacity for targeted wage relief. What we reject is the elevation of wages as the primary objective. Comparatively, wages are linear and consumptive. They are spent annually and are highly vulnerable to inflation. Jamaica's historical pattern of nominal wage growth, roughly tracking inflation demonstrates that workers oftentimes experience no real gain. In contrast, pensions, healthcare coverage, housing support, and training compound over time and offset fixed costs permanently. A wage increase addresses this year's expenses, but a structured pension contributions generates income for decades after retirement. On magnitude, retirement poverty is a decade-long condition, not a temporary inconvenience. On duration, wage gains last months, while pension systems last lifetimes and can build over generations. On probability, inflation is recurring and predictable, whilst compounding pension returns are mathematically cumulative. Therefore, when we measure total welfare across the lives of members and their successors, long-term benefits clearly dominate. Clash 2, paternalism versus autonomy. The opposition tells us principally that trade unions are merely representative bodies existing to fulfill every desire of workers, regardless of the impact that may be derived from it. This approach, however, is flawed. The trade union, whilst it has a representative function, especially when workers' rights and freedoms are being marginalized, it is primarily concerned with making decisions that best benefit the lifetime welfare of the workers under their care. Trade unions have an inherent duty to care for workers, and this may sometimes result in unpopular decisions for the largest benefit to all workers, which is their mandate. The opposition builds their case on meaningless autonomy, giving workers the ability to self-sabotage the future by making decisions that are influenced by present bias and egoism, while proposition conversely tells us that trade unions exist to streamline worker needs and uplift welfare for the whole working class, as opposed to subscribing to innate selfish and destructive short-term desires. We win this clash because we ultimately achieve a higher degree of welfare through our nuanced model than the wage-centered structure of the proposition. Now let's look at overall weighing, right? Opposition offers immediacy. The proposition offers sustainability. Opposition offers consumption, but the proposition offers compounding security, and opposition protects the present self while risking the future, whereas the proposition seeks to protect the entire life cycle. Keep in mind, we still have 20% allocated towards wage increases. Let's look at the real world impact. Both teams agree on the problem at hand being low purchasing power for the members of the trade unions, right? But the discrepancy lies in the root cause, which we say is fiscal insecurity. We believe that the opposition's case is fundamentally detrimental due to the harms coming from their world, right? They're lobbying for prioritization of wage increases, which will be consumed by inflation, whilst exacerbating unemployment and harming our economy. That is just a band-aid on a significantly deeper issue. As I mentioned earlier in my speech, the low wages, especially minimum wage, being as low as it is caused by a lack of education, a lack of skill, and a lack of overall productivity in the working class. We need to fix the root cause and stop slapping a band-aid on the issue, right? The proposition seeks to solve the root cause of fiscal insecurity by protecting workers from catastrophe, by prioritizing healthcare, investment for retirement, and training that enables them to increase productivity, which actually justifies wage increases. We don't just want to give them money, we want to make their present time and skill more valuable, right? Trade unions don't just have a duty to their members now, but the same duty to their members later in life and future members as well. By prioritizing future-oriented benefits without eliminating wage lobbying, we enable trade unions to build an independent, sustainable, productive, and resilient Jamaica for today, tomorrow, and all the days to come forward. With that being said, proud to propose.
And with that, ladies and gentlemen, this debate has come to an end. We thank you also very much indeed for tuning in and for listening to these substantive speeches. Truly, I can speak on behalf of myself and the panel in saying that we very much enjoyed this match. But obviously, there has to be a winner for this debate. And so with that, myself and my two panelists will step away briefly to deliberate on what we thought was an excellent, I'm sure we'll think was an excellent match. And after which we will come back to deliver the results. So we'll step away for just a few minutes and then we will return. So stick back, stay tuned, drink some water, and we'll be back shortly. Thank you.